The chamber stretched beyond what human eyes could fully comprehend. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood at the center of a circular platform that seemed to float in an ocean of darkness. Above him, below him, and extending in every direction were thousands upon thousands of seats arranged in precise geometric patterns. Each seat held a representative from a different world, a different species, a different civilization that had existed among the stars long before humans had even discovered fire. The air hummed with translation fields, operating at frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. Holographic displays materialized and dissolved around him, showing data in languages he couldn't read, numbers in mathematical systems he didn't understand, and symbols that hurt to look at directly. The temperature fluctuated wildly as different atmospheric zones overlapped, creating pockets of heat and cold that drifted through the space like invisible tides. This was the Galactic Council, and humanity was on trial. Marcus had known this day was coming. For 43 years, Earth had been part of the galactic community. 43 years of learning alien languages, navigating incomprehensible bureaucracies, and trying to find a place in a civilization that had been running smoothly. For 8,000 years before humans had arrived to disrupt everything. The charges against humanity scrolled across. Holographic displays in 17 different scripts. Unauthorized expansion into disputed territories. Violation of trade regulations established millennia before Earth had developed agriculture. Interference with protected archaeological sites on worlds humans hadn't even known existed. The list went on and on, each violation catalogued with mathematical precision by species who measured time in geological epochs rather than human lifetimes. A being of pure crystalline light spoke from somewhere high above. The translation field rendered the words in a voice that seemed to come from inside Marcus's own skull. Ambassador Webb of Earth, the Council has reviewed the evidence against your species. Before we proceed to the vote, you may address this assembly. Speak now or accept our judgment in silence. Marcus took a slow breath. He'd prepared for this moment for months. He'd studied every word, rehearsed every gesture, anticipated every possible response. But standing here, surrounded by civilizations that had mastered interstellar travel when his ancestors were still living in caves, all those preparations felt suddenly inadequate. He spoke anyway. His voice was steady, clear, and utterly human in a chamber filled with beings who communicated through light, sound, quantum entanglement, and methods he couldn't even begin to understand. Honored representatives, I stand before you not to deny the charges, but to question the system that brings them. Yes, humanity has violated council regulations. Yes, we have disrupted established trade routes and claimed worlds in disputed space. Yes, we have challenged traditions that existed long before we reached for the stars. But I ask you this: when did survival become a crime? A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. Translation fields buzzed with uncertainty as delegates tried to parse his meaning. Marcus continued. The regulations we violated were designed by species who already controlled the resources they needed. The territories we entered were disputed only because more powerful civilizations couldn't agree on how to divide them among themselves. The traditions we challenged were comfortable for those who benefited from them. Humanity arrived in a galaxy where every advantage had already been claimed, every opportunity already seized by those who came before us. We were told to wait our turn, to be patient, to accept our place at the bottom of a hierarchy 8,000 years old. He gestured to the holographic displays showing humanity's violations. You call these crimes. We call them the actions of a species fighting for a future. Every world we claimed was one your regulations said we couldn't have, even though none of you were using it. Every trade route we established was one your monopolies said we couldn't access, even though it harmed no one. Every tradition we questioned was one that kept us subordinate, kept us dependent, kept us exactly where the powerful species wanted us to be. The crystalline being spoke again. You admit your guilt while simultaneously defending your actions. This is contradictory. No, Marcus said. It's honest. We did what we're accused of doing. But I'm asking you to consider whether your laws are just or simply convenient for those who wrote them. A new voice entered the conversation. This one came from a being that looked like a massive insect, its mandibles clicking in rhythms the translation fields struggled to interpret. You speak of justice, human, but justice requires accepting the decisions of legitimate authority. This council has governed galactic civilization for 8 millennia. Who are you to question its wisdom? Marcus had been waiting for this question. I'm the representative of a species that went from wooden ships to faster-than-light travel in less than 500 years. A species that solved problems your civilizations spent millennia avoiding. A species that looked at the impossible and decided to try anyway. You ask who we are to question 8,000 years of tradition? We're the species that proves tradition isn't the same thing as truth. The chamber erupted. Thousands of voices speaking in hundreds of languages created a cacophony that overwhelmed the translation fields. Some delegates were clearly outraged. Others seemed intrigued. Still others appeared to be conferring with their governments through quantum communicators that operated faster than light itself. A crystalline being raised what might have been a hand. Silence fell with shocking suddenness. Ambassador Webb, the Council will now vote on the motion to expel humanity from galactic civilization. All human colonies will be required to withdraw to your home system. All human vessels will be banned from Council space. All human participation in galactic affairs will cease. The vote begins now. Holographic crystals appeared throughout the chamber, each one linked to a delegate. They began to glow. Red meant a vote for expulsion. Green meant a vote against. Marcus watched as red light after red light blossomed. Like malevolent flowers throughout the massive space dot, his heart sank as the count climbed. 1,000 votes for expulsion. 2,000. 3,000. The green lights appeared too, but far less frequently. Humanity had allies, species that had benefited from human innovation or admired human determination. But they were vastly outnumbered by civilizations that saw Earth as a disruptive threat to galactic stability. 4,000 red lights. 5,000. The vote was becoming a landslide. Marcus stood perfectly still, refusing to show fear or despair. This was the moment everything had been building toward. 43 years of human presence in galactic civilization might end in the next few minutes. Everything humanity had built among the stars could be stripped away by a simple majority vote in a chamber where humans had no real power. The final count appeared on the central display. 4,847 votes for expulsion. 1,153 votes against. Humanity had lost by a margin it wasn't even close. The crystalline being spoke with what might have been satisfaction. The vote is concluded. Ambassador Webb, humanity has been found in violation of galactic code and is hereby expelled from this council. You have 90 days to comply with our directive. Remove all human presence from council space or face military enforcement. Do you accept this judgment? Marcus looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him. Some showed triumph. Others showed sympathy. Most showed nothing he could recognize or understand. This was supposed to be the end. This was supposed to be humanity's defeat. Instead, Marcus smiled. No, he said quietly. I don't accept it. And I invoke Article 73 of the Galactic Charter. The confusion that spread through the chamber was almost physical. Article 73 hadn't been used in over 2,000 years. Most delegates had probably forgotten it existed. The crystalline being's light flickered uncertainly. Article 73 permits a condemned species to present new evidence for reconsideration. What evidence do you claim to possess? I'm not presenting evidence, Marcus said. His voice carried clearly through the translation fields, reaching every delegate in the vast chamber. I'm presenting a choice. You voted to expel humanity from galactic civilization. That's your right under council law. But I need you to understand what that actually means. He touched a control on his wrist. Holographic displays erupted around him, replacing the voting crystals with something far more unsettling. Star charts, trade routes, military installations, resource deposits, and most disturbing of all, detailed analyses of every major civilization's strategic vulnerabilities. For 43 years, Marcus continued, humanity has been learning your languages, your customs, your laws, but also learning your weaknesses, your dependencies, your secrets. We've mapped every trade route in council space. We've identified every strategic choke point. We've analyzed every military doctrine. We've done this because humans are very good at gathering information and very good at using it. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate was staring at the holographic displays, seeing their own civilization's classified information exposed for all to see. You're expelling us from council law, Marcus said. That means we're no longer bound by council regulations. No restrictions on where we can go. No limits on what we can claim. No rules about how we can compete. You're turning humanity loose in a galaxy where we now know exactly where every civilization is vulnerable and exactly how to exploit those vulnerabilities. A delegate shaped like a mass of tentacles spoke in a voice like grinding metal. Is this a threat, human? It's a fact, Marcus replied. You can have humanity inside your civilization, operating under laws we help write, or you can have humanity outside your civilization, operating under no laws at all. The choice is yours. But choose wisely, because once we leave this chamber, the decision is final. The crystalline being's light pulsed with what might have been anger or fear. You would risk war with 6,000 civilizations? We would risk whatever we have to risk for our survival, Marcus said. That's what you never understood about humanity. We don't back down just because the odds are against us. We don't surrender just because the fight looks impossible. We find a way or we make one. That's who we are. He let that sink in for a moment before continuing. But there's another option. Don't expel us. Give us a real seat at this table. Let us help build a better galactic civilization, one that works for young species as well as old ones. One that rewards innovation instead of punishing it. One that creates opportunities instead of hoarding them. We can be your greatest allies or your most persistent problem. You get to choose which. The silence in the chamber was absolute. 6,000 civilizations, represented by beings of every imaginable form, all faced the same unexpected reality. Humanity wasn't begging for mercy. Humanity was negotiating from a position of strength, even in defeat, and no one quite knew what to do about it. The emergency session of the Council's Leadership Committee met in a chamber far smaller than the main hall, but infinitely more important. Marcus sat across a table of polished black stone from 3 beings who controlled more power than most species could comprehend. Chancellor Vorath, the crystalline entity who had presided over the vote. High Merchant Talix, whose species controlled 70% of all galactic trade. And Counselor Rexter, a being with 6 arms and enough military authority to wage war against entire star systems. They'd been talking in circles for an hour. Marcus let them. Sometimes the best strategy was simply to wait while your opponents argued with themselves. The human's threat cannot be ignored, Rexter said, his mandibles clicking with agitation. He admits that humanity has been gathering intelligence on every council species. That alone constitutes espionage worthy of military response. Except we just voted to expel them, Talix pointed out, his serpentine body coiling tighter. We have no legal authority over expelled species. If we attack them now, we validate their claim that council law is applied selectively based on power rather than justice. Then we rescind the vote, Vorath suggested. Find a procedural error that invalidates the results. Humanity remains in the council under increased supervision. Marcus finally spoke. That won't work. You can't put the wine back in the bottle. Every delegate in that chamber now knows that humanity has detailed intelligence on their civilization. Supervision won't change that. The information exists, and we're not giving it up. Raxter leaned forward, all 6 arms spread in a threatening display. Then what do you want, human? What will it take for you to surrender this intelligence and accept council authority? I don't want to surrender anything, Marcus said calmly. I want to negotiate a new relationship between humanity and the council. One based on mutual respect rather than subordination. Talix's hood flared with interest. Explain. Marcus pulled up economic projections on the table's holographic display. Humanity has spent 43 years analyzing galactic commerce. We've found inefficiencies everywhere. Trade routes that take twice as long as necessary because they follow ancient patterns no one's bothered to optimize. Resource extraction methods that waste enormous amounts of material. Manufacturing processes that haven't been updated in millennia because the species using them achieved comfortable profit margins and stopped innovating. He changed the display to show new trade routes. Updated extraction techniques, streamlined manufacturing workflows. We can increase galactic economic output by 20 to 30% within 10 years. More goods, lower prices, higher profits for everyone. But we can't do it while operating under regulations designed to protect established monopolies from competition. Talix studied the projections with obvious fascination. These efficiency gains are possible? We've tested them in human space. They work. But scaling them up requires changing council trade law, eliminating territorial restrictions, and breaking up monopolies that have existed for thousands of years. Marcus met the merchant's eyes. You control most galactic trade. These changes would threaten your current business model, but they'd also create opportunities for expansion that dwarf your current operations. You can own a smaller piece of a stagnant pie or a larger piece of a growing one. Vorath's crystalline form pulsed with thought. You're proposing fundamental restructuring of council economic policy. That requires more than simply rescinding the expulsion vote. I'm proposing that humanity becomes a full council member with actual voting rights, Marcus said. Not a junior partner who follows rules we had no part in writing. Give us authority to propose legislation, participate in committee decisions, and help shape galactic policy. In exchange, we'll work within the system rather than outside it. Raxthura's laugh was like rocks grinding together. Impossible. Species earn voting rights through millennia of demonstrated stability. Humanity has existed in space for barely a century. And yet we've accomplished more in that century than some species do in 10,000 years, Marcus countered. You measure worthiness by age. I measure it by capability and contribution. Humanity has both. We just demonstrated that by gathering intelligence you didn't know we could collect. Imagine what we could accomplish if we were actually trying to help instead of just trying to survive. The 3 council leaders exchanged glances. Some form of communication passed between them that Marcus couldn't detect or interpret. Finally, Vorath spoke. We cannot grant full voting rights immediately. The political opposition would be insurmountable. But there may be a compromise. Provisional council status with limited voting rights on matters of trade, exploration, and scientific cooperation. Full voting rights granted after 50 years if humanity demonstrates responsible participation. Marcus considered the offer carefully. It wasn't everything he wanted, but it was far more than humanity had yesterday. What about the expulsion vote? Nullified on procedural grounds, Vorath said. The charges against humanity will be reviewed by a neutral committee. Most will likely be dismissed or reduced to minor violations. And the species that brought those charges? Talix's hood flared in what might have been amusement. Will discover that their own compliance with council regulations is not as perfect as they believed. Nothing severe. Just enough inconvenience to discourage future attempts at using council procedures as political weapons. Marcus stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. After a moment of hesitation, Vorath reached out with a portion of her crystalline structure. Talix extended part of his serpentine body. Rexther carefully offered 2 of his 6 arms. The alliance was sealed. Marcus left the meeting knowing he'd accomplished something impossible. Humanity had been hours away from expulsion and potential extinction as an interstellar species. Now they had a path to full council membership and the authority to reshape galactic civilization, but the victory felt incomplete. He'd seen the way some delegates had looked at him in the main chamber. The fear, the resentment, the barely concealed hatred. Not every species would accept humanity's new status peacefully. Lieutenant Corver was waiting outside the chamber. How did it go? We won, Marcus said. Provisional council status, limited voting rights, path to full membership in 50 years. That's incredible, Corver said. But his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. You don't look happy about it. I'm worried about what comes next, the security chief admitted. You just backed the entire Galactic Council into a corner and forced them to accept terms they didn't want to give. That creates enemies, Ambassador. Powerful ones. I know, Marcus said quietly. But the alternative was accepting expulsion and abandoning everything humanity has built out here. We gambled. We won. Now we deal with the consequences. They walked through the diplomatic quarter of the council station, passing beings from hundreds of different species. Some nodded respectfully as Marcus passed. Others turned away or whispered to their companions. The news of the backroom deal was already spreading through the station's rumor networks. Marcus's communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. The Secretary General wanted a full report. The media wanted interviews. Politicians wanted to claim credit. Everyone wanted to know how a single human diplomat had convinced the Galactic Council to reverse its decision. But as Marcus composed his response, he found himself thinking about something Chancellor Vorath had said. Demonstrated stability. That's what the Council valued above all else. Proof that a species could participate in galactic civilization without causing disruption. Humanity had just demonstrated the opposite. They'd proven they could cause enormous disruption when pushed. They'd shown they had the intelligence, the capability, and the willingness to challenge. Even the most powerful institutions in the galaxy. The question now was whether they could prove they deserved the opportunity they'd just won. Marcus spent the rest of the day meeting with human staff throughout the council station. Diplomats, traders, scientists, security personnel, everyone who had worked to establish humanity's presence in galactic civilization. They deserved to know what had happened and what it meant for their future. The response was universally positive, but tinged with uncertainty. They'd won a battle, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had just begun. That evening, Marcus stood in his quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there were 317 human colonies, thousands of human ships, millions of human lives that depended on the decisions made in council chambers. He just gambled all of them on a single bold strategy. Time would tell if he'd been brilliant or reckless. His communicator chimed again. This time it was a message from an unknown source, encrypted with techniques that suggested serious expertise. Marcus hesitated, Before opening it, the message was brief. You have made powerful enemies, Ambassador Webb. Watch your back. There was no signature, no way to trace the sender. But the warning was clear enough. Humanity had won its place at the table. Now came the hard part, surviving long enough to make use of it. The pulse of superheated plasma missed Marcus's head by less than 10 centimeters. He felt the heat wash over his face as Lieutenant Corver tackled him to the floor of the Council's Trade Subcommittee chamber. Around them, delegates scattered in panic as a second shot scorched through the air where Marcus had been standing. Stay down, Corver shouted, his body shielding the ambassador as more energy pulses blazed overhead. Security forces materialized from concealed positions throughout the chamber, weapons drawn and scanning for threats. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. He'd known there would be opposition to humanity's new status. He'd expected political maneuvering, legal challenges, maybe even economic pressure. He hadn't expected someone to try killing him in the middle of a council session. The energy fire stopped. In the sudden silence, Marcus heard the mechanical whine of blast doors sealing. Whoever had attacked was now trapped in the chamber with everyone else. Corver helped Marcus to his feet, keeping his body between the ambassador and potential danger. We need to evacuate you immediately. No, Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. Running would send the wrong message. We stay. The security forces had pinpointed the attack's origin point. A squad moved carefully toward a maintenance alcove in the chamber's upper tier, weapons ready. Marcus watched as they breached the position and emerged, moments later with a prisoner in energy restraints. The attacker was a Trellin warrior, his 6 arms bound and his armor marked with a symbol Marcus recognized. The triple spiral of the Preservation Coalition, a conservative faction that had opposed every reform humanity had proposed. Chancellor Vorath arrived within minutes, her crystalline form vibrating with barely controlled fury. Ambassador Webb, are you injured? Lieutenant Corver's reflexes saved my life, Marcus replied. But I'm fine, Chancellor. Vorath approached the bound Trellin. Warrior Kexeval of the Third Fleet. You serve House Raxmoth. The prisoner's mandibles clicked defiantly. I serve the true council, the one that existed before these humans corrupted it with their poison. You serve no one but your own extremism, Vorath said coldly. She turned to the security forces. Take him to detention. I want a full investigation. His connections, his orders, everything. As the guards dragged Kexeval away, Marcus noticed something disturbing. The attacker was smiling. Chancellor, Marcus said quietly, this wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a message. From whom? From whoever wants to prove that accepting humanity was a mistake. Marcus gestured to the dozens of delegates who had witnessed the attack. Think about it. We were presenting trade reforms that would benefit hundreds of species. Now this attack will dominate every news cycle in council space. Every delegate who saw this will remember that humans bring violence and chaos. Vorath's crystalline eyes shifted through several colors. You believe this was designed to undermine your provisional council status. I'm certain of it. And it might work unless we respond correctly. What do you propose? Marcus had been thinking about this since the moment Corver had pulled him to safety. He could demand increased security, withdraw from public sessions, maybe even suggest returning to Earth until tensions cooled. All reasonable responses that would also signal weakness. Or he could do something that would show the galaxy that humanity didn't back down from threats. I propose we schedule an emergency session of the full council, Marcus said. I have evidence that the Preservation Coalition has been sabotaging reform efforts for decades. Not just against humanity, but against any species that threatens their control. You have such evidence? We've been compiling it for months. We knew opposition would come. We just didn't expect it to turn violent this quickly. Marcus met Vorath's gaze directly. The question is whether the Council has the courage to confront its own corruption. The emergency session was called for that evening. Marcus spent the intervening hours preparing his presentation, while Corver coordinated with Council security to prevent another attack. The security chief was furious that someone had smuggled weapons into a council chamber, and his investigation was revealing disturbing gaps in the station's security protocols. When Marcus entered the main council hall, it was even more crowded than during the expulsion vote. Thousands of delegates had come to witness what many were calling the most important session in council history. Marcus didn't waste time on preliminaries. He activated holographic displays showing voting patterns, resource allocations, and trade decisions going back centuries. For 43 years, he began, humanity has been studying how the Galactic Council makes decisions. What we've discovered is a systematic pattern of obstruction, targeting any species or proposal that threatens certain entrenched interests. He highlighted specific voting records. The Preservation Coalition claims to defend galactic tradition. In reality, they defend a system that concentrates power and profit among a small group of ancient species, while keeping younger civilizations in perpetual subordination. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some delegates looked shocked. Others seemed unsurprised, as if Marcus was confirming what they'd suspected for years. Today, one member of the Preservation Coalition attempted to murder me. But that attack wasn't about me. It was about silencing the voice of change. It was about maintaining a status quo that benefits a few at the expense of the many. Marcus changed the display to show the economic models he'd shared with Vorath. These reforms we're proposing aren't radical. They're practical updates that acknowledge how galactic civilization has evolved. They create opportunities for species that have been marginalized. They increase efficiency and prosperity for everyone. He paused, letting his words reach every corner of the vast chamber. The Preservation Coalition wants you to believe that change is dangerous. But the real danger is stagnation. The real threat is a council so afraid of adaptation that it resorts to violence to maintain control. A delegate from a younger species rose to speak. Ambassador Webb, your analysis is compelling. But how do we know these reforms won't simply replace one power structure with another? It was the question Marcus had been expecting. You don't. That's exactly why our reform package includes transparency requirements, term limits for council positions, and rotating leadership among different species. We're not trying to replace the old guard with ourselves. We're trying to create a system where no single faction can dominate indefinitely. He returned to the voting records. Look at this data. When was the last time a species achieved full council voting rights? 1,600 years ago. How many species have been in provisional status for over 1,000 years? 23. This isn't a meritocracy. It's an oligarchy. And oligarchies eventually collapse. The chamber fell silent. Marcus could see delegates calculating, weighing their options. The older species looked angry. Many younger civilizations looked hopeful. Chancellor Vorath rose from her seat. The Council will vote on Ambassador Webb's reform package in 30 days. Until then, I'm ordering a full investigation into the Preservation Coalition's activities. Any delegate found to have engaged in violence or illegal obstruction will face immediate expulsion. As the session adjourned, dozens of delegates approached Marcus. Some offered support. Others asked questions. A few made thinly veiled threats. But through it all, Marcus maintained his composure. This was the moment that would define humanity's future in galactic civilization. Not the expulsion vote, not the backroom deals, but this public confrontation with the forces that wanted to keep the galaxy exactly as it had always been. Marcus knew he'd made powerful enemies today, But he'd also made equally powerful allies. Species that had been waiting for someone to challenge the old order. Someone willing to take the risks they couldn't afford to take themselves. As he left the chamber with Corver at his side, Marcus felt the weight of what he'd started. Change was coming to the Galactic Council, whether it was ready or not. And humanity, for better or worse, had become the catalyst for that change. The only question now was whether they would survive long enough to see it through. The vote on humanity's reform package was scheduled for exactly 30 days after the assassination attempt. Marcus spent every one of those days building the coalition that would determine whether decades of human effort ended in success or catastrophic failure. Today, he was meeting with Delegate Corvin of the Drex Confederation, a mid-tier species that controlled 12 systems and typically voted with the conservative bloc. The Drex resembled large crustaceans with compound eyes that made reading their emotions nearly impossible. "Your reforms are ambitious, Ambassador Webb," Corvin said through her translator. "But you ask us to abandon alliances that have served the Drex for 2,000 years. Why should we trust that your new system will be better?" Marcus had refined his pitch through dozens of similar conversations. "Delegate Corvin, I've studied your voting history. In the past 500 years, your species has introduced 87 proposals to the Council. Do you know how many passed?" Corvin's antennae twitched. "I am not certain. 3, all of them minor procedural adjustments that threaten no one's interests. Every substantive proposal the Drex made was blocked by the same coalition you're considering supporting." He displayed voting records on his datapad. "Your proposal to reduce tariffs on Drex mineral exports? Blocked by the Trellin Empire, which controls competing mining operations. Your request for military assistance against pirate raids? Denied because protecting a minor power wasn't worth Council resources. Your petition to investigate monopolistic trade practices? Dismissed without discussion." Corvin studied the records intently. "I had not considered the pattern. The current system doesn't serve the Drex Confederation," Marcus continued. "It tolerates you as long as you remain subordinate. Our reforms would give species like yours actual influence, a real voice instead of permission to speak when convenient. And if we support your reforms, what happens when the Trellin Empire retaliates? They've been our primary trade partner for centuries. Have they? Or have they been your only option because Council regulations prevent you from accessing better markets?" Marcus showed economic projections. "We've identified 7 species that would benefit from direct trade with the Drex under current regulations. Establishing those relationships requires approval from committees dominated by species that profit from your limited options. Our reforms would eliminate those restrictions." Corvin was silent for a long moment. "I must consult with my government." "Of course. But consider this. The Preservation Coalition tried to murder me to prevent this vote. They're desperate because they know that once the galaxy sees an alternative, species like yours will realize you've been accepting scraps when you deserve much more." After Corvin left, Lieutenant Corver entered with an update on their vote count. Firm yes votes, 1,843. Firm no votes, 2,112. Undecided, 2,045. Marcus grimaced. They were behind with less than a day until the vote. "We need at least 300 more confirmed votes. We've done everything we can, Ambassador. Maybe we need to accept that we might lose. And then what? Watch everything we've built collapse?" Marcus shook his head. "We didn't come this far to give up because the numbers look difficult." His communicator chimed with an urgent message from High Merchant Talix, requesting an immediate private meeting. Marcus showed it to Corver, who immediately objected to sending the ambassador anywhere without full security. They compromised on Corver accompanying Marcus, but waiting outside the actual meeting. The Vexari embassy was a masterpiece of flowing, architecture that seemed to shift and breathe. Talix met Marcus in a private garden where bioluminescent plants created patterns of light in artificial twilight. "Thank you for coming, Ambassador Webb," Talix said, his serpentine body coiled elegantly. "I will be direct. The Merchant Coalition is prepared to support your reforms in exchange for specific concessions." Marcus had expected this. "What concessions?" 3 points. First, transparency requirements for trade contracts must include exemptions for proprietary business information. Second, the new trade route approval process must include merchant guild representation. Third, tariff restructuring must be phased in over 20 years rather than 10. The first 2 were reasonable. The third would significantly delay benefits for developing economies. 15 years and we have a deal. Talix's hood flared. 17 years. Final offer. 17 years. Agreed. Marcus completed the Vexare gesture of agreement. The Merchant Coalition will deliver 932 votes in favor of your reforms, Talix said. That should be sufficient for passage. Why now? Marcus asked. You could have waited and negotiated from a stronger position if the reforms failed. Because I recognize a fundamental truth about markets, Talix replied. The species that adapts fastest to changing conditions prospers. Your reforms are inevitable. Ambassador Webb, either they pass tomorrow and we shape them collaboratively, or they pass in 10 years after a costly battle that benefits no one. I prefer efficiency. As Marcus left the embassy, Corver showed him the updated vote count. We just picked up 932 confirmed votes. That puts us at 2,775 in favor. We need 3,001 for a simple majority. Then we keep working, Marcus said. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a genuine spark of hope. The final 24 hours were a blur of negotiations and compromises. Marcus met with delegates from species he'd barely heard of, learning their concerns and finding solutions. Some wanted cultural autonomy protections. Others sought guaranteed committee representation. A few demanded specific economic considerations. Marcus gave ground where he could, without compromising core principles. By the time he entered the council hall for the vote, the count stood at 3,097 in favor, just above the threshold for a simple majority. Chancellor Vorath called the session to order. The council will now vote on Resolution 47 Alpha, comprehensive reforms to council structure, trade regulations, and membership requirements. Delegates, register your votes. Marcus watched as voting crystals throughout the hall began to glow. Green for yes, red for no, amber for abstention. The tally display climbed steadily. Green, 2,845, 2,967, 3,120-4. Red, 2,431, 2,598, 2,756. The final count appeared. Green, 3,647. Red, 2,301. Amber, 52. They'd won. Not just a simple majority, but a supermajority that would make the reforms much harder to reverse. Vorath announced the results formally. By a vote of 3,647 to 2,301, with 52 abstentions, the Council approves Resolution 47 Alpha. These reforms take effect immediately. The chamber erupted in celebration and outrage. Marcus accepted congratulations from supportive delegates, while others stormed out in protest. Corver appeared at his side. Congratulations, Ambassador. You just changed galactic history. We changed it, Marcus corrected. Thousands of people across hundreds of species made this happen. But even as he celebrated, Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Passing reforms was one thing. Implementing them successfully would be another challenge entirely. And somewhere in the shadows, the Preservation Coalition was already planning their response. 6 months after the reform vote, Marcus barely recognized the council chamber. The traditional tiered seating had been replaced with a circular arrangement symbolizing equality among member species. The voting system now provided real-time transparency, displaying not just counts, but detailed explanations of each delegate's position. This was the first session of the reformed Galactic Council, and Marcus was about to discover if their grand experiment would actually work. Chancellor Vorath, re-elected under the new term-limited leadership system, called the session to order. Welcome to the first official meeting of the Reformed Council. We have 17 proposals on today's agenda, beginning with the application for full membership from the Taluxian Commonwealth. The Taluxians were a young species, only 200 years into interstellar travel. Under the old system, their application would have been automatically denied for at least another millennium. Under the W rules, membership was based on capability rather than age. The debate was vigorous. Conservative delegates argued the Taluxians lacked experience. Progressive delegates countered that the species had demonstrated technological innovation and diplomatic maturity. The Merchant Coalition noted the Taluxians' growing economic power. When the vote concluded, the application passed with 63% approval. Marcus watched as the Taluxian delegate, a small amphibious being named Kellis, accepted her species' new status with visible emotion. This was what the reforms were meant to accomplish, creating opportunities for species that deserved them, rather than forcing them to wait for arbitrary timeframes. During a recess, Councillor Raxter approached Marcus privately. The Trellin had initially opposed humanity's inclusion, but had become an unexpected ally. Ambassador Webb, Raxter said formally, I owe you an apology. When your species first arrived, I viewed you as disruptive barbarians. I was wrong. Your reforms have given hope to species that had resigned themselves to permanent subordination. Thank you, Counselor. That means a great deal. However, I must warn you, the Preservation Coalition has been damaged but not destroyed. They're reorganizing under new leadership. They will attempt to undermine these reforms through legal challenges and political pressure. We expected that, Marcus said. There's something else. Raxter glanced around to ensure privacy. There are rumors of a faction more extreme than the Preservation Coalition. They call themselves the Purifiers. They believe species like humanity should never have been allowed into galactic civilization. They view the reforms as an existential threat. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. How credible are these rumors? Very. My intelligence sources have identified 3 incidents in the past month. Sabotage of human trade ships. Cyber attacks on reform-supporting governments. A coordinated disinformation campaign painting humans as a dangerous invasive species. Have you reported this to Council Security? I'm reporting it to you first because you need to understand what you're facing. The Purifiers won't attempt another public assassination. Instead, they'll try to prove that human integration leads to chaos. They'll manufacture crises and blame your species. Marcus absorbed this carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because I can adapt to the new reality or become irrelevant, Raxter said. I choose adaptation. Also, the Purifiers represent something far more dangerous than your species. They're ideological extremists willing to commit violence. That threatens everyone. Then we work together to stop them, Marcus said. Share your intelligence, and I'll make sure it reaches the right people. The session resumed with debates on trade expansion, resource allocation, and scientific cooperation. Marcus participated actively, noting how the new voting system created more nuanced discussions than the old binary structure. That evening, Marcus met with his core team. Lieutenant Corver, Economic Advisor Patricia Ruiz, and Cultural Liaison Devin Okonkwo gathered in the embassy's secure conference room. We have a problem, Marcus began, sharing what Raxler had told him. The Purifiers are going to try to prove humanity's involvement in galactic civilization is dangerous. Ruiz pulled up economic data. We've already seen signs. 3 human merchant vessels attacked in the past month. The attacks were blamed on pirates, but the patterns suggest coordination. The disinformation campaign is escalating, Okonkwo added. We're tracking 40 different conspiracy theories. Humans are genetic experiments. Humans are harboring ancient weapons. It's designed to make other species afraid of us. Corver studied a tactical display. If the Purifiers want to manufacture a crisis, they have plenty of opportunities. We have human colonies scattered across 42 sectors, most lightly defended. A coordinated attack could create the appearance of instability tied to human expansion. Then we get ahead of this, Marcus said. We've been reactive. It's time to be proactive. What do you have in mind? Ruiz asked. Marcus displayed a star chart showing human colonies and council territories. We propose a mutual defense initiative. Human colonies receive council protection in exchange for humans contributing to council security forces. It protects our people, demonstrates our commitment to collective security, and makes it harder for the Purifiers to attack us without attacking the council itself. That's a significant escalation, Okonkwo warned. Some species will view this as humans trying to control galactic security. Some species already view everything we do as a threat, Marcus countered. We can't make decisions based on what extremists think. We focus on building genuine partnerships with moderate species who want the reforms to succeed. Over the next 2 months, Marcus worked to implement the Mutual Defense Initiative. Every negotiation revealed new complexities and new concerns. But slowly the framework took shape. Human security personnel began training alongside council forces. Joint patrol routes were established. Intelligence sharing protocols were implemented. When the Purifiers attempted to attack a human mining colony, they found themselves facing a combined human Drex Vex Ari security team that repelled the assault and captured several. Attackers. The interrogation of those prisoners revealed the Purifiers' organizational structure and future targets. Council security forces, working with human intelligence analysts, began systematically dismantling the extremist network. 1 year after the reform vote, Marcus attended a ceremony in the council hall. The occasion was humanity's formal elevation from provisional to full council membership, 50 years ahead of schedule. Chancellor Vorath presided. 1 year ago, we took a risk. We chose to embrace change rather than resist it. Many feared this would lead to chaos. Instead, it has led to renewal. She gestured to the assembled delegates. In the past year, 7 new species have achieved council membership. Trade has expanded by 18%. Scientific cooperation has produced breakthroughs in medical technology and energy production. And species that once saw no path to advancement now see hope. Vorath's crystalline eyes focused on Marcus. Ambassador Webb, humanity's journey from expelled species to full council member has been extraordinary. Your willingness to challenge the status quo has benefited the entire galactic community. On behalf of the council, I grant humanity full voting rights and all privileges and responsibilities thereof. As the chamber erupted in applause, Marcus felt the weight of what they'd accomplished. Humanity had arrived as outsiders, been judged and found wanting, gambled everything on a bold strategy, and emerged as architects of a new galactic order. But he knew this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species and infinite possibilities. The reforms had created a foundation for cooperation, but maintaining that foundation would require constant work. New challenges would emerge. New crises would test their resolve. As Marcus accepted congratulations from delegates who had once voted to expel humanity, he thought about the message he'd send to Earth, not just news of success, but a reminder of what it represented. Humanity had proven that young species could contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization. That change, while difficult, could lead to improvement. That diversity was a strength rather than weakness. And that sometimes the greatest risk was not taking a risk at all. Lieutenant Corver approached with a rare smile. "Well, Ambassador, you did it. You changed the galaxy." Marcus looked around the hall at thousands of species gathered in tentative harmony. "We did it. And now comes the hard part, making sure it actually works." "Always the optimist," Corver said dryly. "Someone has to be," Marcus replied. "Humanity didn't come this far by expecting things to be easy. We've never been good at accepting limits. That used to be considered a flaw. Now it's a feature." As the ceremony concluded, Marcus remained in the chamber for a moment, alone in the vast space where so much history had been made. 1 year ago, they'd stood here facing expulsion. Today, they stood as full members with power to shape the future. It had required courage, strategy, sacrifice, and luck. But humanity had always been good at beating the odds. Somewhere out among the stars, on 317 colonies across 42 sectors, people were living lives that would have been impossible without the risks taken here. That made everything worthwhile. Marcus left the hall where his team was waiting. They had work to do. The galaxy wasn't going to improve itself. But for the first time since arriving at the council, Marcus felt genuine confidence that humanity had earned its place among the stars. Not through conquest or dominance, but through the simple audacity of demanding that the galaxy live up to its own ideals. And that was the most human thing of all.